Hey guys, it's COREROSS and welcome to Busting Rainbow Six Siege. Today we are mythbusting the new operator Aurora as she is coming with Operation Prep Phase, the first operator of Year 10. Now she basically just brings doors to Rainbow Six Siege, but I'm actually going to do a little tutorial at the start here because there's surprising complexity to her. And we need to get these basics out of the way first. So let's jump into it. When you spawn, you will have one of her panels available immediately, and you'll see that the other ones will load up over time, kind of like Legion and such. And her doors themselves can only be placed in doorways, not in windows, so not like a castle barricade. There also needs to be no barricade in the doorway for it to work. And she can fire these barricades from a launcher. This pretty cool looking big weapon, almost looks like a freaking railgun. Now it can be fired from either 1 meter away, no less, or up to 15 meters away. So extremely versatile. Also, when I fire this into a doorway, you'll notice that it starts a cooldown before I can fire the next one off. So it's not like I can jump into a room and just secure every entry point within seconds. It will take a little bit of time. Now these doors as well can also be opened and closed, but there is quite a bit of smart technology in them. So right now you'll notice there is no target at the top. This is how you open and close the door. If I move closer, the target opens. So this is actually getting within 6 meters of this target, and then I can shoot it and open and close the door. And this is the case for all playable characters, so even defenders get this target when they're close enough. And as you can see, I've moved too far away for the target to appear, but we'll bring down a defender now, and the target will reappear. Now this is interesting because if someone is close to the door, that target of course will be visible. So if you're far away from the door looking at it, and the thing turns red, you know there's someone right there. So it can actually be used as a proximity sensor in a way. However, like a lot of other gadgets in Rainbow Six Siege, it uses line of sight. So if the person close to it is actually just behind cover, it cannot see them and the target goes away. So don't get complacent thinking there's no one there when the target is not visible, as they simply might be behind something. And then on the other side of the door, you might think that both targets match, but it depends on what is behind each side. So for instance, we have a defender right now on our side of the door, and as you can see, the target is visible. But if we head through to the other side, which is very nice, it actually comes up so we can drive the drones through, you'll see that the actual target is not visible. So it only opens if someone is actually present on either side. This makes it very interesting because anytime you want to open and close the door, you potentially have to get close to it in order to do that, or have a teammate or an enemy in the right location in order to trigger the target. It really makes what could be a very boring gadget far more interesting. Now let's jump in and start testing and breaking down this gadget. And we'll begin with the humble barbed wire. These are very normally placed in doorways. So what happens if a door closes? Well, the barbed wire will be destroyed, and this includes any other gadget that happens to be there too, like for instance Legion's mines. So as defenders, we may now need to learn a new behavior in order to place our barbed wires in different locations from normal. Now of course this might lead to frustration, so can you destroy these things easily? And thankfully they can be blown up with explosives. Either impact grenades or nitro cells will do the job. And we'll even talk about some non-explosive options later as well. Now I mentioned earlier that this gadget is smart. So when a defender shoots it, it will take 3 seconds to open. When an attacker shoots it, it will take 1 second to open. But I was very surprised in my testing that closing it for attacker and defender is exactly the same. Now another smart feature they have is the ability to open and close for drones. So as you approach with a drone, it'll open, and as you go through, it'll close behind you. You can even position your drone off to the side, which will keep the barricade in its up position, allowing you to see and shoot underneath. And this also works for Twitch and Brava's drones too. However, it is a bit dumb as well. So for instance, if Mozzie were to take over your drone, he can then freely drive it underneath the barricade. It'd be kind of cool if this thing actually just physically closed and not allowed the captured drones to go under. It's also the same for Echo's drone. This is allowed to go underneath as well. And if you hover next to the door, it still considers the drone close enough to be in the open position. Now, one of the counters mentioned in the reveal for this operator was Tubereau, and the ability to freeze these gates and they will then get stuck open. So this is what it actually looks like. Simply freezing them opens them up. Now, for the most part, I don't think this is a massively useful thing, because of course you can also just shoot them to open them up, but you can throw these from range and potentially be far enough away where you would not normally be able to shoot the target. So there certainly is going to be potential uses here. It's just not a super strong counter, and as soon as the doors defrost, you can shoot the targets to close them again. However, there is a counter that was not mentioned and I think is extremely strong against these, and that's Aurora. So there's two potential things here. First off, any in-air projectile that hits the lasers will get taken out, but I did find some interesting quirks with this. And the other thing is that Aurora can just punch the actual doors and destroy them in one hit. So she's probably one of the best counters, and I don't think she was mentioned at all in the reveal, but I do think she's absolutely brilliant for defeating this and easily clearing out these doors quite quickly if need be. And it saves utility, but you do need to be right next to the doors, of course. Now, the quirk of the lasers taking out the projectiles is shown here. So we've got our character, she fires the projectile at the door, and she's behind a set of lasers, and the lasers fry the projectile. However, I do it again, and this time the lasers are on the door frame that I'm going to attach the door to, and as you can see, it actually gets through fine. So I assume that it's hitting such a high point on the door that it avoids the lasers and deploys fine behind the lasers. However, I will note that we're testing on the test server, so it's very possible this interaction might get tweaked and it would get fried normally. Now, another counter that was mentioned in the reveal was Jaeger, and he will indeed intercept these. However, someone that wasn't mentioned was Wamai, so I was kind of thinking, oh, he probably won't be able to catch them, but actually, he totally can. Although this one, attached somehow to the door, I thought that maybe I could use the magnets to take a panel that's going for one door and actually redirect it to another one. Maybe in some defensive circumstances, it'd be nice to have it on a different door than what the attacker is trying to do. But unfortunately, it did not work. Now let's talk lasers. So in Rainbow Six Siege, there's quite a few laser weapons, one of the main ones being Maestro, and his gadget is able to open these doors. But do remember, you need an actual player there for the target to be visible. If there's no one in range, then of course you cannot shoot it. Now, shooting this target also works with Twitch's drone and other characters like Zero's cameras. And this was a bit of a surprise because I was kind of expecting this to probably be bullets only. So quite interesting to find out that it does work with the lasers as well. Now let's do some quick fire stuff before we do some more experimental testing. So first of all, Oryx can go straight through these barricades, and the barricades cannot be deployed if a castle barricade is already in place. And this is also the case even with a wooden barricade. And also if we flip the order and we have the door in position first and then castle attempts to barricade it, nothing will happen. Earlier test server version allowed you to do this, but not anymore. Maverick can destroy the barricades with his blowtorch, and Mute can even jam these things. There's also a possibility you might be able to hack them with a Mozzie hacked Bravo drone, but I don't have enough players to test that one out right now. And then unfortunately, you cannot put a mirror window on one of these in a double doorway, which would be hilarious. You can also shoot these things with an EMP from a bulletproof camera, and it will cause the door to open. And if you put gadgets on the door and the door is open, the gadgets will be destroyed. This also works for stuff like Goyu's canister, causing fire to spill everywhere. And now let's do some more experimental stuff. So I tested out the audio cues. So there's some interesting stuff with it here where the target appears and disappears. There is an audio cue, so have a listen. So this of course means if you hear this noise, someone is approaching the door. So the audio cues are potentially very important here. I also attempted to see if that audio cue would actually go through the door from the other side, so that I'd be able to hear someone approach from the other side of the door. But that was not the case. It appears that the door is pretty soundproof and the little beep that you hear doesn't make it through at all. But certainly there's a lot you can do here because you could just put holes in the walls in order to hear someone approaching from the other side. And there's many corridors and stuff that would allow that kind of setup. So there's huge potential here for the audio cues for sure. And then I also tested its destruction capabilities. So for things like deployable shields in doorways, they just get wiped out. This is the same for Osa's shield, but you can't cut a player in half. So it won't go down when a player is in the doorway. And testing it as well was kind of interesting because you could potentially shoot it so it's starting to lower, then put a shield operator in there. And then of course that shield operator can kind of like hold down the area. And then if defenders start pushing and getting too close, you could pull back and then the door closes. So there's a lot of potential synergies you could mess around with different operators here. I also attempted to see if we could put an OSA shield in the doorway and then stay close enough so it doesn't close fully, but unfortunately it closes enough that it does destroy the shield. Otherwise, we could have had some interesting setup, so developers were smart enough to not allow that. And then I also did some basic tests with smokes, gas grenades, because we've never had something that can open and close before when it comes to doorways. So I wanted to see, because a while back they added that ability for the smoke's gas to actually spread out. And I was curious, would it still spread out if you put the door up? And in its up position, the gas will go through the doorway and start affecting people on the other side. But if the doorway is down and the gas goes off and then the door comes back up, the smoke just kind of stays in place and as a result does not go through the doorway. All of this is very fascinating, I think, when it comes to how this gadget interacts with everything. As of course, we've never had something like this before. And that now brings us to the conclusion, which is, going into this, I knew this was going to be a boring gadget, but I was going to love it. And I think tactical play with this is going to be just so much fun. Now, the reality is that I love it even more because it's way more complex than I thought it was going to be. And I see a lot of fun and potential with it. It definitely could be overpowered. That's a possibility. I think her having 4 might end up being too many in the end of the day, but a lot of the things I was a bit worried about are not nearly as much of a concern as before. And for me, when it comes to gadgets, one of my favorite is Brava, right? Driving her drone around, hacking stuff, so satisfying. But for a lot of players, it's boring to see that. Whereas this gadget is going to get you right in the mix of it all. And the only downside to me is the loadout. That's the only thing I'm kind of sad about. Her weapons are not really what I'd like her to have. And that's a pity, but I can see exactly why they've chosen the weapons they've gone for. And that's where Brava does well. She does have a relatively boring gadget where you're not doing too much, but then when it comes to combat, she has one of the best guns in the game. Whereas this one is one of the best gadgets in the game, but her DMR LMG combo are not that good for what's probably going to be a close combat operator who's in the mix of the action. But the gadget is top tier. But anyway, guys, I appreciate you coming by and watching. I think we've learnt a lot today, and I've definitely not tested everything. There's still a ton of stuff we could jump into, but this should be enough to get you guys started for the launch of the new season, which is scheduled to happen on March 4th. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll catch you next time.